Sir, I'm afraid you'll have to switch seats. This spot is typically reserved for one of our VIPs, the flight attendant said, her tone polite but her eyes laced with quiet judgment. Isaiah Johnson, a sharply dressed black man in his mid-40s, looked up in confusion. His boarding pass clearly showed 1A, first class, his assigned seat. Just behind him, a white woman in a designer pantsuit, Lauren Whitmore, cleared her throat with theatrical annoyance. "That's my seat every flight," she muttered, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Isaiah had just wrapped a keynote speech at a global ethics and AI conference in Boston and was heading home to San Diego. As the CEO of VerityOne, a $3.2 billion tech firm specializing in behavioral analytics and anti-bias software, Isaiah was no stranger to navigating tense spaces. But even he wasn't expecting to have his legitimacy questioned before takeoff. The luxury around him, champagne carts, cashmere blankets, and 6-foot seat spacing, offered no protection from the oldest form of gatekeeping: the assumption that some faces don't belong in certain places. Isaiah Johnson had never been one to seek attention. Quietly brilliant and grounded by humility, he built his multi-billion-dollar tech empire from a cramped studio apartment in Oakland, coding late into the night while juggling contract gigs to pay rent. His company, VerityOne, now led the industry in AI solutions that helped corporations eliminate bias in customer interactions. An irony not lost on him as he found himself at the center of the very problem he had spent decades working to solve. Isaiah grew up in a working-class neighborhood where his mother worked 2 jobs and reminded him daily that kindness and discipline would take him further than entitlement ever could. That philosophy shaped not only his leadership style, but his character. He always remembered names, receptionists, janitors, interns, and believed that how a person treats those who can't offer them anything in return reveals everything. Whether tipping generously at hotel checkouts, holding doors for strangers, or making time to mentor young developers from underrepresented backgrounds, Isaiah lived his values. He didn't flaunt success, he wore a simple grey suit, traveled without an entourage, and preferred quiet lounges over VIP receptions. But behind that understated presence was a man with undeniable influence. This flight from Boston to San Diego wasn't just another business trip. It was a return home after delivering a headline keynote at the Global Ethics in AI Summit, where Isaiah had spoken about accountability, representation, and the hidden algorithms of discrimination. He had specifically chosen seat 1A on this AeroVista Airlines flight for its extra legroom and built-in work surface, perfect for reviewing final proposals for an upcoming board meeting. The airline, known for its sleek branding and curated luxury experience, promoted its first-class cabin as a sanctuary for the world's most important travelers. Yet, as Isaiah settled into his seat with a tablet in hand and notes tucked neatly in his briefcase, he found himself reminded of a truth he had hoped the world had outgrown. Prestige doesn't shield you from prejudice. The comfort of the cabin, plush seats that recline into beds, monogrammed napkins, the faint clink of champagne flutes, belied the undercurrent of scrutiny that surfaced the moment he sat down. No matter how much wealth he had built or accolades he had earned, one look from the wrong person could still call his presence into question. Isaiah wasn't surprised by the tension, he had lived it before. But what did surprise him, even after all these years, was how subtle discrimination had become. How easily it slipped past polite smiles and company slogans into policies that quietly said, "You don't belong." As the flight attendant hovered and Lauren Whitmore loomed behind him like she was reclaiming a birthright, Isaiah realized this flight would be more than a commute. It would be a confrontation. And whether AeroVista Airlines realized it or not, the cost of this confrontation was about to soar far higher than any first-class ticket ever could. The tension in the first-class cabin thickened as flight attendant Chase knelt slightly, voice lowered but clear enough to carry to surrounding passengers. "Sir, I'm really sorry, but Ms. Whitmore flies with us frequently and prefers this seat. Would you mind relocating to 4D? It's still in first class," he offered with a strained smile that couldn't mask the discomfort behind his eyes. Isaiah raised a brow, confused but composed. "This is my assigned seat," he said calmly, reaching into his inner jacket pocket to produce both his boarding pass and his platinum member card. Chase hesitated as he examined them. Undeniably valid, both scanned and approved at the gate. But instead of stepping back, Chase glanced nervously toward the front of the cabin, clearly awaiting further instruction. Behind Isaiah, Lauren Whitmore, now standing in the aisle with arms crossed and a look of casual entitlement, sighed audibly. "Honestly, this always happens. They really need to flag my preferences in the system," she remarked to no one in particular, but loud enough to perform for the cabin. Her words were a declaration of seniority, a subtle reminder to the crew and passengers alike that she was a regular, someone whose comfort, unlike Isaiah's, apparently deserved accommodation. Passengers nearby exchanged glances. A businessman across the aisle discreetly lowered his tray table and angled his phone to begin recording. A young woman in 2C furrowed her brows and whispered something to her seatmate. Isaiah took a breath. "I'm sorry," he said, this time more firmly, "but I selected this seat intentionally when I booked the ticket 2 months ago. I need the legroom to work, and I have every right to sit here." Chase shifted uncomfortably. "I completely understand, sir. I really do. It's just that, well, Ms. Whitmore is one of our elite customers. She typically sits in 1A and tips well. My supervisor asked me to speak with you." The words landed with unintended weight, an admission that preferential treatment was being extended not based on policy or fairness, but on personal bias and gratuities. Isaiah didn't flinch. Instead, he reached for his phone, unlocked it, and pressed record. Holding it at chest height, camera facing forward, he spoke in a measured voice. "This is Isaiah Johnson. I've been asked to give up my assigned first-class seat, Seat 1A on AeroVista Flight 612, despite having a platinum member card and a valid boarding pass. The reason? Another passenger supposedly prefers this seat and usually sits here. I am being asked to move because someone more familiar to the crew wants this spot. I want this documented." Chase's eyes widened slightly. "Sir, there's no need to film." "I disagree," Isaiah cut in, still calm. "There's every need to film this." Around them, more phones began to appear, passengers silently chronicling the quiet storm unfolding. Chase backed away slightly, whispering something into his crew phone, then retreating toward the galley with quick steps. Lauren remained standing, now pretending to scroll through her own phone, but her smirk was unmistakable. Isaiah turned back to his screen, continuing to record. "I'm not moving," he said simply. "I've paid for this seat. I've earned my status, and I'm not going to be silently shifted just because someone else tips more." It wasn't anger that defined his voice, it was the quiet assertion of someone who had fought to be respected in rooms just like this. And in this moment, first class had never felt more divided. Within 10 minutes of the confrontation, the video Isaiah recorded began gaining traction online. Fast. Captions like "Black CEO asked to vacate first class for white regular," and "They tried the wrong one," flooded social media platforms. But what truly ignited the internet was the one headline that no PR team could spin. "Man removed from seat for not being recognized. Turns out he owns part of the airline." Hashtag number AEROVISTABIAS. Shot to the #1 trending topic on Twitter within the hour. Users were outraged, not just by the clear racial implications, but by the quiet entitlement in Lauren's tone, the cowardly compliance of the flight attendant, and the chilling familiarity of the scene. Celebrities, journalists, and civil rights advocates began reposting the clip, tagging AeroVista and demanding accountability. Meanwhile, inside a sleek corner office on the 34th floor of AeroVista Airlines headquarters in Dallas, CEO Daniel Reyes was reviewing weekly operations reports when his assistant burst in, visibly flustered. "Sir," she said, holding out her phone, "I think we have a problem." The screen showed the now viral video of Isaiah being asked to move. Daniel frowned, his gut instinct whispering that this was worse than a standard PR headache. He had seen dozens of passenger conflicts go public, but something about this one felt different. Too calm, too clear, and too poised to ignore. Moments later, the head of AeroVista's strategic partnerships stormed in, pale and breathless. "That man in the video, that's Isaiah Johnson," he said, "founder and CEO of Verity One. We're supposed to sign a $70 million digitization contract with his firm next quarter." Daniel blinked. You mean Isaiah Johnson? The executive nodded grimly. It gets worse. He holds just under 18% of our stock through Verity One and its affiliates. Between his firm and their private equity partners, they control nearly a fifth of AeroVista's shares. He's not just a VIP, he's practically family. For a long moment, Daniel didn't speak. His face slowly paled as the magnitude of the mistake dawned on him. The flight crew hadn't just humiliated a paying customer, they had publicly insulted one of their most important stakeholders. And worse, the entire world was watching it unfold in real time. Across multiple monitors in the executive war room, analytics dashboards showed social sentiment plummeting, mentions surging, and brand trust collapsing. Major news outlets had already picked up the story. Investor forums buzzed with rumors of stock sell-offs, and screenshots of Isaiah's platinum member status flooded Reddit and LinkedIn alike. Daniel turned to his communications chief and legal counsel, both of whom were already fielding urgent inquiries. "Get me a direct line to Isaiah Johnson," he said, his voice low and tense. "Tell him I want to speak. Personally." But even as the team scrambled, one thing was abundantly clear. This wasn't just a PR disaster. It was a betrayal of values, a test of leadership, and a moment that could define the fate of AeroVista Airlines. Daniel Reyes wasted no time. Within the hour, a private video call was arranged between him and Isaiah Johnson. The CEO of AeroVista, usually composed and media-polished, now appeared visibly unsettled as he faced the man whose quiet dignity had just exposed a seismic crack in the airline's culture. "Mr. Johnson," Daniel began, voice taut with urgency, "on behalf of AeroVista, I offer our sincerest apologies. What happened on Flight 612 was unacceptable." Isaiah, seated calmly in his private office with his legal counsel and COO beside him, didn't respond with anger, but with clarity. "This isn't just about one bad flight," he said. "It's about the system that allowed it." Then, with the same precision he had used to build Verity One from the ground up, he laid out his terms. First, immediate termination of all crew members directly involved, including the flight attendant, Chase, and any supervising personnel who allowed the situation to escalate. Second, a third-party audit of AeroVista's customer service protocols, with specific emphasis on implicit bias and discriminatory practices. The results would be made public, and Isaiah's firm would help design the new training required. Third, he announced that the $70 million contract between Verity One and AeroVista would be placed on indefinite hold until the airline could meet a measurable equity standard, one developed by Verity One's ethics division. "We don't partner with companies that perform inclusion for the camera," Isaiah said. "We invest in those that prove it in real time." The conversation didn't end there. Lauren Whitmore, whose arrogance had sparked the entire ordeal, was swiftly banned for life from all AeroVista flights. But her problems extended far beyond her favorite airline. Journalists began digging into her background after the incident gained traction, uncovering suspicious lobbying activity linked to her consulting firm and a string of ethically grey contributions to political candidates. By the end of the day, Lauren's company had placed her on indefinite administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Her name trended under a new hashtag, #lounge privilege. As for Isaiah, he issued no press statement, made no rounds on morning news shows. He let the facts speak for themselves. And the facts were these: he hadn't raised his voice, hadn't thrown a fit, hadn't asked for special treatment. He had simply stood his ground with the composure of a man who had fought for his seat, not just on that plane, but in every room he'd entered his entire life. For AeroVista, the fallout was immediate. But it was the long-term consequences that would matter most. The man they'd tried to displace was now the one setting the terms. And this time, the cost of ignoring his presence came with a shareholder call, a legal review, and a national conversation about who gets to feel at home in first class. In an unprecedented move, AeroVista Airlines grounded its entire domestic fleet for 36 hours, announcing a mandatory company-wide bias training initiative developed in partnership with Verity One. Flights were cancelled, operations paused, and terminals went eerily quiet as every employee, from executives and flight attendants to customer service reps and baggage handlers, entered immersive workshops focused on dismantling bias and building equitable service models. But Isaiah Johnson wasn't interested in simply punishing those who had failed him. He wanted to build a system that didn't fail anyone else. Alongside the reform mandate, he proposed a bold second initiative, Project Recode, a rehabilitation program designed for dismissed employees who chose to participate in intensive ethics and inclusion training. Those who completed the curriculum successfully and demonstrated measurable behavioral change could reapply for new positions within the company at different capacities, not as a way to excuse past harm, but as a path to redemption. Accountability, Isaiah stated at a board press briefing, is not about exile, it's about growth with responsibility. The program drew widespread praise, earning coverage in national media outlets as a progressive model for corporate correction. 12 months later, AeroVista had transformed. Independent audits confirmed it had become the first airline in North America to meet the Global Customer Equity Index, a comprehensive benchmark developed by VerityOne that measured unbiased service delivery across race, gender, and socioeconomic status. Surveys showed that passengers across demographics now reported equal satisfaction levels with crew treatment and service response, a milestone that had never been achieved in the company's 42-year history. Internally, employee morale improved as staff felt empowered to speak up, supported by new systems that rewarded ethical behavior over passenger favoritism. The faces once associated with scandal, like Chase, the flight attendant, were now quietly working behind the scenes in restructured departments, having earned their way back through Recode. The program didn't just rehabilitate employees, it rewired a culture, and it didn't stop at AeroVista. Several Fortune 500 companies reached out to VerityOne to replicate the model in their own operations. One rainy morning the following spring, Isaiah boarded an AeroVista flight from San Diego to Chicago. The gate agent greeted him by name, not with reverence, but with respect. No special treatment, no tension, just acknowledgement of a frequent flyer. As he settled into his seat, again 1A, a flight attendant approached, not to displace him, but to offer coffee and thank him for his role in reshaping the company. Isaiah nodded politely, took a sip and opened his tablet. The aircraft lifted, quiet and smooth, into the clouds. No announcements, no spectacle, no stares. Just a man in his seat, finally allowed to exist without question. That, Isaiah thought, was the real measure of change. Not the headlines, not the stock recovery, but the silence where bias used to live. The video that ignited the movement would go on to be viewed over 40 million times, captioned simply, "He didn't speak out of anger, he spoke for the millions who couldn't." It wasn't the volume of Isaiah Johnson's voice that made it powerful, it was the calm, unshakable clarity with which he defended not just his seat, but the principle behind it. In a world where first class often means first come, first recognized, Isaiah's stand resonated because it wasn't fueled by rage or ego. It was rooted in quiet resistance. He didn't need to yell to be heard. Instead, he let the system indict itself, one biased policy, one passive decision, one assumption at a time. The footage didn't just capture a moment of injustice, it exposed the fragility of a system where privilege speaks louder than proof. And in doing so, it reminded viewers everywhere that dignity isn't something earned by familiarity or favoritism. It's a right that should travel with you, no matter the zip code on your license or the skin you live in. Discrimination doesn't always arrive with slurs or raised voices. Sometimes it shows up with a smile, masked as policy, disguised as preference. It lives in phrases like, "We usually reserve this seat," or "She's a regular," and thrives in places where power is assumed rather than earned. The real danger of this kind of bias is how ordinary it becomes, how it folds itself into routines, dress codes, and seat maps until those affected can't even explain what they're being denied. But Isaiah's story and the ripple effect it caused proved that standing your ground isn't about defiance. It's about redefining the ground entirely. True power doesn't come from reacting to injustice with vengeance, but from transforming the conditions that allowed it in the first place. Isaiah didn't speak for himself. He spoke for the customers who get silently shuffled to the back, for the passengers whose accents invite skepticism, for the workers who are told to smile and comply while their humanity is ignored. He didn't need the spotlight, but he understood the value of stepping into it when the system refused to. Because change doesn't start with mission statements or diversity slogans, it starts when one person refuses to budge, looks inequity in the eye and says, "I'm not moving." And that courage, repeated enough times, becomes culture. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt overlooked, silenced, or subtly excluded, don't just scroll past. Hit like, leave a comment with your experience, and subscribe to X Daily Stories, where we bring you powerful narratives that aren't just meant to entertain, but to wake something up. Because the world doesn't change with big speeches. It changes with small moments, captured clearly, that force us all to ask, who gets to feel like they belong? And more importantly, what are we doing to make sure the answer is everyone?